Hello, and today we're going to talk about cameras and lighting, and I'm not going to get real deep into them. In fact, the best camera and lightings you can find are in 3D animation packages like Maya or ZBrush or 3ds Max. That's kind of the bread and butter. But for a game engine, they are very important still. Most of the time because you can't import a lot of this stuff. So we're going to look at some of the things and kind of just use some very basic techniques to kind of help you get through just making a simple level. When you first see this, they're all contained right here in that little square. And you will see these like little suns. The little suns mean that you have a light source in there. Now, how did I create them? I put 3 in there. You just go to game objects, and then you can either do light, and then down here you can see that in the same list you have cameras. I went with directional, so I went light, directional light. And the reason why is because I want a nice quality shadow. Now, what most people make the mistake with is going with not enough lights. You usually have to use multiple lights. The reason being is that you just do not have enough reflective surfaces in Unity, and you don't usually have the power to reflect off of all the surfaces that you do have. So you have to kind of fake it a little bit. And in fact, that's why I have 3 here. So if I just hit play real quick, what you can see is right by the cylinder there, you essentially have what I call an umbra and a penumbra. The dark area is the umbra, the penumbra is the lighter shadow. In order to get that, and granted this is a little bit cheap, I use 3 directional lights. And it kind of gives a nice fuzzy light that way. Now let's go ahead and turn that off again. So each one of these 3, if you look at them, you can tell the direction right away, right? It starts top left, goes bottom right. Now, I fiddled with the angle just a little bit on each one. And you can do that using any of these tools. So in other words, I can use the rotation tool to make it go differently, and see, as you can see now, I have a double shadow down here. So you don't necessarily have to push play in order to get this to work. Each on a slightly different angle, but essentially all coming from the same top left going bottom right. Now let's go ahead and take another look at lights. I have a point light, a spotlight. Spotlight and directional light are very similar. The difference is spotlights are going to be directional the same way, but now they're going to have essentially one area on your surface that they'll light up instead of the entire surface. So directional is in some ways considered in one direction only, but it's all over your entire environment, the whole Unity world that you've created. Point light's the same thing. It's infinite, but now it goes from one direction outward. So you can see this little bright area right here. That is directly below this light area. So it's kind of almost like the sun, so to speak. But since it's a point because it only comes from one point, so there's no body of light that's doing it. So in other words, if you think about it, a light bulb might be 2 inches, 3 inches in diameter. So it's going to let light out from multiple spots on that diameter. Or should I say the surface of the light. Here it's only going to come from one spot. So it can be a little intense in the middle sometimes. I'm going to delete that. So for the beginner, I would just start with directional and point light. Spotlight, maybe if you have a car or something like that and you want to use head beams or something like that, those work. But they can be a little bit problematic in their pieces. So let's start with just those 2, the directional light and the point light. I'm going to click on one of my directional lights since it already exists. And as you can see here, you have an intensity. If I change that intensity, as you can see, it brightens it up. So you want to keep In this case, since I have 3 of them, I wanted to keep them all below 1 just so I don't oversaturate. And as you can see, it's a pretty bright surface as is, because I think it's 0.5 and then a 0.25 and a 0.25, which ends up being about a 1. So it's a very bright area right now. As you can see, you can play with the shadows. No shadows is great if you're looking to decrease your render times and things of that nature, where you're worried about lag and getting your frame rates up. The other one thing I would suggest is changing the color from white to something else. In this case, it's very like a little light beige. It's real hard for me to see even here, but it should be close to white but not white, because if you notice, all light is not quite 100% white. It's very close. A lot of them are very close, but very few are just that pure white. If you go into a hardware store, you can actually get soft white and hard light and all those things. Usually, even from like a fluorescent or an LED or something like that, they have different versions depending on the application. And then I would say do the same thing here. You can look online in many different places to find the actual colors of them. I always pick something a little off yellow, so white to yellow, and that seems to work pretty well. And then if you get a purple shadow, that's pretty nice, because then you got the complementary contrast. All right, let's take a look at cameras now. And as you know, when you first start off, you have to start with a camera, and we already did, and you can see the little piece right here. But you can create your own camera. And in fact, if one of the basic tricks of creating a camera in Unity is making it first person. So we do have a person down here, so let's go ahead and create a camera. You don't get a lot of different cameras here. It's nice, this one actually lets you put a skybox on it, which is pretty good. So you can get a horizon line, as you can see out there. So I'm going to just not play around with that too much. The field of view will make it wider and shorter. This is good. I always find the problem with field of view is actually monitor dependent more than what you do with the camera. It's better to go with a simple 45 to 60 field of view angle, because if you go too far, then it looks like they're got almost like a fisheye lens, and if you go too short, it's like you're in a periscope. And unfortunately, I'm like one of those people who's been blessed with good peripheral vision, so it always drives me nuts to play first-person shooter games, not because they're bad, but because I know in real life I can see things out of the corner of my eye with a much larger field of vision. With virtual headsets and stuff like that, we're getting closer to that, but it's still, unfortunately, we're still kind of stuck with a limited range. So we got it at 60 here for our field of view, and so we'll just keep that there. As you can see, the most you can do is 179, because if you go up to past 179, you're essentially looking backwards as well as past 180, you're looking backwards as well as forwards, so you don't want that. Okay, now we have this camera. Let's go ahead and move it. And what you want to do is, let's say now we're going to just drag it through this person here. I got about down to his knees, so maybe I should bring it up to his head. And go ahead and use the 4-person view. Sometimes that works a little bit better if through the I guess it's the 4 split. I always want to call it 4-person. I'm not sure why, but so you can use the 4 split view, and that will let you go through this. And as you can see, as I go through this guy, you can see bits of him get removed until I'm just in front of him. So now this is kind of like a first-person view, but the problem with this is that if I move this guy and I go back to this camera, the camera didn't move with him. But there's a simple fix to that, and that is you take the camera, which is, remember, you start off with a main camera, and now you should have a camera on this list here, and you can actually take that camera and put it, for this one, if you have the capsule from last time, go ahead and mount it right to the capsule. That would be good. And actually, I'm not going to do that yet because I did not move my guy back yet. There we go. What you want to do is attach it right to Unity Man, and then now it's on the camera's indented from Unity Man, which means this is the parent and this is the child. So if I grab Unity Man, actually let me just click on him to make sure I have him, the camera goes with. So that's good. But here's the bad news. If you have a camera and you move it, the Unity Man's not going to go with it. So it's good for a first-person shooter where the controller is going to be on the human versus the camera. Next time we'll focus on controllers to control that camera.